Hey everyone, welcome back to my Introduction to Python course. Today we're going to go over our final project. Okay, so this project will be very easy and it will implement a lot of the material that we've learned in previous videos. So if you have a question about some of the stuff that I'm going to cover in this tutorial, be sure to check out the link that I'll provide in the description below that will cover the playlist. Okay, so this project basically will be somewhat of a calculator, not exactly a calculator because it won't have all the functionality such as multiplication and division. We could add that, but for simplicity's sake, I'll just add addition and subtraction. Uh, if you've paid attention to the previous video, we talked about importing libraries. So I'm going to import Tkinter, which is used for the GUI. And this will allow the user to enter or input numbers, two numbers to be exact, and then click on the add or subtract buttons that I'll provide. And then it will output print the output of those operations. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with the video. Okay, so in order to start our program, make sure that you write a comment. And I'm going to say import modules needed for program. You always want to make sure you write a comment for every line of code that you have so that, I've stated this in previous videos, so that people can know exactly what you're trying to accomplish and so that you don't lose track for yourself. And then we're going to actually import our modules. So since I need Tkinter in order to create my GUI, aka canvas to work on, I'm going to say from Tkinter import star, and that star just means all. So I'm basically telling the program to say from the Tkinter library, I want you to import all of the modules within that library. Okay, and then now I'm going to import math because we're going to be performing operations using the math library. Okay, so one quick thing that I need to say, whenever you're writing a program and you're trying to solve a specific problem, you need to pinpoint that problem. That's number one. And then number two is you need to approach the problem step by step. A lot of new programmers try to solve a specific problem that they're trying to write the program for all at once. You can't do that. So you need to, take it step by step in order to solve that problem. Okay. So what we need to do is we need to think about this, just using some logic. Will I need something to actually, well, I know I need something to actually input, but I need to be able to have a place to actually input my numbers in, if that makes sense. So what we can do is we can say create GUI where the user can input values. Okay, so that GUI, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, is where we're going to place our inputs in, and it's also going to display the solution to our inputs whenever we do add or subtract. Okay, so now the second command that we want to do, besides importing our modules, is we want to actually create our GUI. So I'm going to say window, and I can say whatever I want. I don't have to actually say window. A lot of people say root, some people say A, some people say T. It doesn't matter, just as long as you know what it is you're trying to do. So I'm saying window because it's almost as if, you're looking through a window whenever you create your GUI, because it's shaped as a box. So, or square, rectangle, it doesn't matter. So we're going to say window is equal to TK, and this is a built-in command whenever you write TK. Okay. Now, if I run this, nothing actually happens. let's see if I run it again. You can see something opens up down here where my cursor is. I'll run it again just so you can see. But it closes back out. So it's trying to do something. So the reason why it's actually closing is because in order for this window to open and to remain open, I need to put it in a loop. So loop, and you can see the command kind of pops up automatically, is called the main loop. So whenever I run it, bam, it stays open because it's continuously looping. But as you can see, there's nothing in this GUI, right? That's because we haven't added anything yet. And it just says TK at the top. We want to make it a little bit pretty, a lot nicer. So we're going to add a title, and we're going to change the size of the GUI. Okay. So let's go ahead and change the size. So I'm going to say geometry. Geometry is a built-in method within Tkinter. So remember, whenever you want a method added to your variable, you just add a dot and then that particular method. Okay, so the geometry is 400 by 200. I can make it whatever I want. That's just something that I personally like. Okay, and if I run it again, voila, you can see the size of it. So this 400 width or length and 200 width. Might be saying that backwards, but you get the point. Okay, and then we're going to add a title. Title is another built-in. And we're going to say example math problem. And the reason why I have this error popping up is because I forgot to put it in quotes. So if I run it again, there you go. You can see it says example math problem at the top. Okay, so the second thing we want to do is we want to add where we want our user to input the numbers. In order to do that, we need to establish a grid system on our GUI. So I'll go ahead and run it again so I can show you what I'm talking about. So if you look at my cursor, we want to break this up into a symmetrical half. We want our words, which gives the user instructions, to be on the left-hand side. So it could say something like enter the first number, enter the second number, and then so on and so forth. And then we want our inputs to be on this right-hand side where the numbers will be inputted. Okay, so in order to accomplish that, the left-hand side is going to be where our labels are. So let's go ahead and start typing our labels out. So I'll go ahead and stop this. And I'll go ahead and say create labels for the input boxes. And you might ask, how do I know exactly what commands to type out for Tkinter and math and whatever library I might actually be using? And the reason why that is because two things. I look at the documentation. So if there's something, I might want to use on a Python program, I just quickly go do a Google search and I look at the documentation on Google to see what commands are available for Tkinter and math. And then also, practice. So just practice, practice, practice. It's not like riding a bike. You have to practice so that you don't lose it. Okay. So that's just my little segue, but let's go ahead and finish. So we're going to create our labels, and we'll say label. Okay, so label is another command within Tkinter, and I want it to be for the window. And then I want the text to say, enter the first number. Okay. Then I'll put that and then close quotes. And as I stated before, I want to put this in a grid. So I'll put grid, row is equal to 1, column is equal to 0. Okay, so just like in an Excel spreadsheet where you have, it's almost like a grid-like system. We want to turn our GUI into a grid-like system as well. So we have row 1, so it's going to be on the first row, and then it's going to be on the first column, so 0. Okay, so I could put 0 right here because remember in Python, Python starts counting numbers from 0, but I want a little bit of space between the title as well as the row. So there's going to be an empty space, but I don't want any space for the column. So, it's going to be on row 1 and then column 0. Okay, we're not done yet. Comma, and then sticky is equal to W. So basically what sticky is equal to W, what that means is it indents everything on, to the, I should say left hand side. Because it's a grid system, you could say N for north, E for east, W for west, and S for south. So west would be on the left hand side. Why, the documentation doesn't just say L or R, I don't know, and T and B for top and bottom, but they just decided to create it in a directional sense. Okay, so let's go ahead and create another label. So window again, because that's where we want our label on. We want it on the window. Text, and enter the second number. We want it in grid. And then row is equal to 2, and column is also still equal to 0. And then we want sticky is equal to W for west. Let's go ahead and run our program just so we can see how it looks. Okay, so there's nothing there just yet, and that's okay, and I'll tell you why. Okay, so the reason why there is nothing there yet in the GUI is because these labels are not contained within the main loop. So I'm going to, and that was a mistake on my part, I'm going to put them in the main loop. The main loop always has to be at the end of our GUI. So this is to initialize the window, and the main loop keeps it running, but it also has to be at the end of our program. All right, so if we rerun this, you'll see labels now. Okay, awesome. Let's go ahead and add one more thing. I want to add another label. Window text is equal to, and let's say the answer is, and then grid, row is equal to 3, column is equal to 0, sticky is equal to W again. Okay, if we rerun our program, there you go. That's good. And we have plenty of real estate, plenty of room to operate in our GUI. Okay, so now that we've established the labels, let's go ahead and establish the right side of the grid, which will be our inputs. So if we want to create our entries, our inputs, let's say creates entry for user input. Okay, and let's say these variables feed back. Well, let's leave that blank for now. I'll leave that blank for now because I don't want to confuse you. My goal is to have the inputs actually do something, if that makes sense, right? It would be useless if we put in our numbers and then we press our buttons and it doesn't output what we want. So let's go ahead and establish another variable. Let's say first number is equal to entry, and then notice there, you can say this, but we want to, if you leave this blank, this parentheses blank, the entry is not going to be placed anywhere. But where do we want to actually have our entry in? We want it in our window. Okay. And then we can say second number is equal to entry and then window again. And then we want to have a blank. And the reason why we're adding this blank is because there is, we want our actual answer to be displayed within a window as well, but we don't want to have it assigned to a variable. So let's go ahead and press play. Let's go. I'm gonna put this down some. So they have a little bit of a mistake. The reason why is because we haven't established where it is in the grid. So now let's go ahead and arrange our variables within a grid system. So arranges user input in a grid system to organize the window view. Okay, so first number dot grid, just like we did for the labels, except we're doing this for our inputs. So basically what we establish is we establish our inputs within a variable, and now we're putting our variables, adding our variables to the grid. Okay, and we want our grid to be row 1, column 1. So remember at the top, this was column 0 on the left-hand side. Now we're establishing column 1, which will be on the right-hand side. Second number dot grid, row is equal to 2, column 1. And we want our blank to also be a part of the grid. Row is equal to 4, column 1. Let's go ahead and change this to 3 just so you can see how it looks. I want you to see something. So now let's go ahead and run our program. Okay, so that actually looks really good. And so, we can enter information in, data in, but it doesn't do anything just yet. All right, next we're going to add our add functionality button and as well as our subtract button. And I want to add a quit button as well. So let's make some space. And we're going to say creates buttons for quit, add, and subtract. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to say button. Button, of course, as I keep stating, is another word that is built within Tkinter. You can look that up on the Tkinter documentation on their website. Window, as always, and then text. And let's go ahead and say quit. Okay. Oops. and we'll say command is equal to window destroy. So what that does is whenever you press this button that's going to be built, it destroys the window, or basically just causes it to disappear. Okay, and close that out. Put it on a grid, as always. And I'm going to say, let's say 4, row 4. The reason why I'm hesitating is because I'm not sure if it's going to give me enough room, because I want to make sure that I have enough room for the other ones. Put that on sticky W, and I want padding, which is the padding, to equal 4. Okay. So let's go ahead and run that. I'll close this out as well with close parentheses. Let's see how it looks. Okay, so it doesn't look too bad. Quit, and if I press the quit button, it does exactly that. So that's great. It works perfectly. Okay, now we want to add our add and subtract button. So to add these two buttons, let's go ahead and say button window text is equal to add, and we want the command to equal add, and then we want to close, want to close parentheses, which we already have done, and then add it to the grid. And we want to say row 5, row is equal to 5, column is equal to 1, sticky is equal to E. Didn't mean to do that. Sticky is equal to E, and patty is equal to 4. Let's go ahead and keep it on the left hand side. Let's do that. I just want to see something. Okay, that looks good. And I want to, let's say if I take away the sticky W, let's see what happens. Sometimes it's good to kind of experiment. Okay, so it puts them on a different row, but it puts it in the middle. So let's go ahead and put this on row 4. I like the way it's starting to look. Let's put it on the same row. Okay, that looks good. I'll keep it like that. And let's go ahead and add our last button. So I'll copy and paste this, and I'll change this to subtract. I'll keep it on the same row, same column. And by default, because there's already something on the west orientation within sticky, as you saw with the add, it just adds it to the right of it. So it should add subtract to the right of add as well. Okay, so what it did was it added it on top of it. I don't want that to happen. So what we want to do is we want to let's say sticky is equal to E. Let's see what that does. So if I rerun this, okay, so it looks good. There's space right here, but that's okay. We're not trying to make it too pretty, but what we're really concerned about is the functionality of it. Okay, so right now, if I were to add some numbers in here, let's say I want to add 3 to 5 and press the add button or press the subtract button, it doesn't do anything. So what we need to do is we need to actually establish a way of causing, and I forgot to change this to subtract in our command. I need to have a way of making these commands do something. And so in order to do that, the commands will have to be placed within a function. Remember, a function is exactly how it sounds. It does something. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. But before we do, I noticed I made a mistake here. I want to make sure that whenever I establish my function and I relate it back to this command key, I want it to say just add, not in quotes and not capitalized. And I want this to just say subtract. Okay. So the reason why this is giving me an error, is underlining it in red, is because if I try to run this, just like I said, it'll give me an error because these commands for this button are not actually connected to the function that we're trying to create. So let's go ahead and create our function. Our function is going to be placed outside of our window, as you can see right here. So I'll go ahead and say def and then add, put in parentheses behind the add, and then colon, and then it automatically indents it whenever you press enter. Notice that import is grayed out. That's because we're not actually using it just yet, but we will. Okay, so what I want is I want to think about this using some logic. I want my function to do something. I want it to add something, right? And then I want it to be able to return a specific value whenever this function is activated. Now, in order to get those values, it has to come from those entries, right? So remember, whenever we run our GUI, we put in numbers, number 1 and number 2, and then it's supposed to output a value in our blank space after we either press the add button or the subtract button. So for our function, let's go ahead and call this addition. We have to be careful. We don't want to name it the same thing as our function. So we can say addition is equal to, and we can say first number plus second number. That still won't do anything because we actually haven't connected it back to our entries. So I'm gonna go ahead down here and I'm gonna put a comment and say these variables, the variables under this comment, feed back into the function of add, and I'll put this in quotes. So I'm saying that whatever I enter into my GUI for my number entries, it feeds back into the function, and the function, whenever I press the command key down here, whenever I press this add button, it activates this function to create an addition property or operation after, whatever numbers I put in. Okay, so I said a mouthful there. I'll go ahead and show you how to actually get these values, and then it'll make more sense. Okay, so try to follow me. I'll say get. That's a command in Python, a standard command in Python. It's not specific to Tkinter or math. It's just a standard command. So whenever I enter in this number, this variable for the first number and the second number, is basically is telling the get method is telling it to grab these values from here so that it can feed it back into this function. Okay. Now, one other thing that I want to think about is I don't want to just enter in integer numbers. I want to be able to enter in decimals as well. So if you remember from previous videos, I talked about integers, floats, and other different types of things like that. So I'll put this in a float just in case, so that whenever I enter in an integer and a decimal and I add those two numbers together, it doesn't give me an error. Okay. And just to be on the safe side, I actually have to do this, but I like to put everything in quotes. I mean, not quotes, parentheses. And one other thing that we need to do is we also need to have a blank insert and 0, and then not solution, but addition. So this basically just relates back to what we're trying to solve for. Okay. So if I try to run this, it still won't run because I haven't created a function for my subtract. So I'll just comment that out for now, just so that I can show you that the add function works. Okay, so let's go ahead and add our different numbers. And if I press add, there you go. So this is the solution to what we just added. And that works perfectly. One thing I want to make clear too, I didn't mention the 0 right here. This just basically says, what it means is it returns a blank value for our insert. So it's almost like a placeholder until this operation is performed. If I don't put anything right here, it will return an error. So that's just something that you just have to, learn and know whenever you're working with Tkinter. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy this. And I'm going to do the same thing for subtract. And I'm going to say, let's change this to sub. And I'll change this to sub down here. So let me uncomment this. And I'll change this to sub. So now that whenever I go back up here, I can spell out the full word. Okay. So just changing it, making sure that everything matches. And I'm going to put the subtraction right here. Okay, so I don't have any errors or anything right here that's in red. So let's run it. Okay, our subtract button comes back now that we uncommented everything. And oops, looks like it's giving me, looks like it froze a little bit. Okay, now let's say this. Perfect, right? What if I change this number to 19, and I'll subtract it. Okay, that looks good. What if I add? Okay, that looks great. Okay, so now let's go ahead and quit it. All right, so guess what? Congratulations. You are done with your first Python program. Okay, so, I mean, there's plenty of other things that you can do. My mistake, we didn't actually use math. However, if we wanted to use like a square root method, then we would have to use math. There's also some other things that you can use math with. So I'll go ahead and delete that. But yeah, congratulations. You have created your first Python program using a very cool library that I like to use, Tkinter. So, if you've, like I said it before, you can use the square root, you can do multiplication, subtraction, all these other different types of things. Some people use it to create actual calculators. We did something similar to that. Except we didn't have all the different types of numbers, and the buttons for the numbers. But yeah, so this is, this is a huge accomplishment if you follow along so far. And use this as a stepping stone. Use it as a way to just continue to create and experiment with other different types of programs. Change the numbers around, change the different types of values. Look at the documentation. Don't let this be a stopping point. Okay, so uh, that is the end of my introduction to Python course. Congratulations. I wish I had a certificate that I could send you guys, but just know that you've completed something that is a major accomplishment for a new programmer. And as always, make sure you share this video, you like, subscribe, comment down below if you have any questions about previous videos or just this video in general. And I'll see you in the next one.